I used to think I was the luckiest man alive. Sitting here now, knowing what I know, it's almost laughable how naive I was. But back then, 17 years ago, when Sarah Williams said yes to my proposal, I genuinely believed I'd won the lottery. My name is Ethan Vance, and I'm 45 years old. I work as an electrical engineer at Power Grid Solutions, pulling in a solid salary. Not bad for a kid from nowhere who worked his way through college on scholarships and sheer stubbornness. But the real prize, I thought, was Sarah. Beautiful, ambitious Sarah who promised to build a life with me while I climbed the corporate ladder. The deal seemed perfect back then. She'd manage our home, create the foundation that would let me focus on providing for our future family. I'd be the breadwinner, she'd be the heart of our home. It was traditional, maybe old-fashioned, but it worked. Or so I believed. 4 years into our marriage, Liam came along. Our daughter was everything I'd dreamed of, curious, intelligent, with these piercing eyes that seemed to see everything. 6 years later, Jacob followed, a ball of energy who lit up every room he entered. I threw myself into being the provider they deserved. The comfortable suburban house with the white picket fence. The reliable income that meant Sarah never had to worry about bills. Weekend adventures, little league coaching, Saturday morning bookstore runs with Liam. I coached Jacob's baseball team every season, never missed a game. Those Saturday mornings with Liam at Barnes and Noble became sacred. She'd curl up in the children's section with a stack of books while I nursed my coffee, watching her absorb stories like a sponge. Those moments felt like pure gold. My family was my greatest achievement, more valuable than any promotion or project at work. Sarah seemed content in her role. She managed our household with military efficiency, attended every school event, maintained our social calendar. She was the perfect wife and mother, or so it appeared. I trusted her completely. When the late-night phone calls started, I didn't question them. When she suddenly developed an interest in her appearance, new clothes, gym memberships, expensive makeup, I was proud. She deserved to feel beautiful. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. The longer errands that stretched for hours, the distracted conversations where she'd check her phone mid-sentence, the way she'd retreat to another room for certain calls. But I was absorbed in a major infrastructure project at work, something that would secure our future for decades. The irony cuts deep now. While I was building a secure future for my family, my wife was building an escape route. I remember the exact moment I realized something had shifted. It was a Tuesday evening in October, and I'd worked late again, trying to finalize the project specifications. I walked through our front door expecting the usual chaos. Jacob's homework scattered on the kitchen table, Liam reading in her corner chair, Sarah preparing dinner while orchestrating the evening routine. Instead, I found silence. The house felt different, charged with an energy I couldn't identify. Sarah was sitting calmly on our living room couch, still wearing the dress she'd put on for her lunch with girlfriends. But her posture was wrong, too straight, too composed, and her expression, I'd never seen that look before. Cold, determined, distant. "We need to talk," she said firmly, and that's when I noticed her wedding ring was missing from her finger. What? The words hit me like a physical blow, but not the meaning. Not yet. I actually laughed. Standing there in my work clothes, briefcase still in hand, I laughed because surely this was some kind of elaborate joke. Maybe she was testing a line from some book she'd been reading or rehearsing dialogue for the community theater group she'd joined last spring. But Sarah's expression didn't change. That cold, determined mask remained perfectly in place. "I'm serious, Ethan. Sit down," she commanded, her voice steady and controlled. The briefcase slipped from my fingers, hitting the hardwood floor with a dull thud. I remained standing, my mind struggling to process what was happening. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. "I've been having an affair," she announced with chilling casualness, like she was discussing the weather. "His name is Anthony Thorne. I've been seeing him for 3 months. I'm in love with him." The room started spinning. I gripped the back of our armchair, the one we'd picked out together 8 years ago when we redecorated, to steady myself. "Sarah, what are you?" I started to protest. "I want a divorce," she cut me off, her voice gaining strength. "I've already consulted an attorney. I want full custody of the children, and I'm entitled to half of all marital assets. I'm moving out next week, and Anthony will be taking a more active role in the children's lives." The questions came tumbling out in desperate success. "Ian, why? What did I do wrong? When did this start? How could you throw away everything we built?" I pleaded, my voice breaking. But her answers were like surgical strikes, each one designed to inflict maximum damage. "I was bored, Ethan," she replied with disturbing calmness. "I felt entitled to happiness. Your constant work made me feel lonely and neglected. Anthony makes me feel alive in ways you never could." "But what about our family?" I asked desperately. "What about everything we've built together? He understands my needs, my desires, my dreams for something bigger than suburban mediocrity." She answered dismissively, as if 17 years of marriage meant nothing. "What about the kids?" I managed to ask, my voice cracking. "They'll adapt. Children are resilient," she replied coldly. "I deserve custody because I've been their primary caregiver. You work 60 hours a week, Ethan. When was the last time you took Liam shopping or helped Jacob with homework? I've been raising them essentially as a single mother for years." Each justification was a knife twist, not because they were true, but because they contained just enough truth to sting. Yes, I worked long hours. Yes, I traveled occasionally for projects. But I'd done it all for them, for this family I was apparently losing. I spent that night in our guest bedroom, staring at the ceiling while Sarah slept peacefully in our marital bed. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years and drove straight to my lawyer's office. David Baker had handled our house purchase and wills. He was a family friend, someone I trusted completely. But the news he delivered was more devastating than anything Sarah had said the night before. "Without proof of adultery directly affecting the children or evidence of gross misconduct, Sarah has the legal advantage," David explained, his usually cheerful demeanor replaced by professional gravity. "She's been the stay-at-home parent, the one who's always been present for school events, medical appointments, day-to-day care. Family courts typically favor the parent who can demonstrate consistent, hands-on involvement. The best I could hope for was joint custody and the standard 50-50 asset split. Even worse, I'd be paying child support and possibly alimony, money that would support Anthony Thorne's comfortable lifestyle in my former home with my children." "But she's having an affair," I protested desperately. "Doesn't that matter?" David shook his head sadly. "Not unless you can prove it's harmful to the children, and even then, it's an uphill battle. Modern family law focuses on the best interests of the children, not punishing adultery," he replied with professional resignation. I left his office feeling hollow, defeated before the battle had even begun. Sarah had outmaneuvered me completely. While I'd been focused on building our future, she'd been planning my destruction with calculated precision. The next 2 weeks were hell. Sarah continued living in our house, preparing for her exit with cold efficiency. She packed her belongings methodically, sorted through photo albums like she was editing out our shared history, and spoke to me only when absolutely necessary about logistics. I tried to maintain normalcy for the kids, but I was drowning. Every morning felt like waking up in a nightmare I couldn't escape. I began documenting everything, tracking Sarah's movements, trying to gather evidence of the affair, recording our conversations when legally permissible. But Anthony was careful, Sarah was strategic, and I came up empty-handed time and time again. The children noticed the tension but didn't understand the full scope of what was happening. Jacob, my energetic 10-year-old, kept asking why Mommy and Daddy weren't talking. Liam, always observant, had grown unusually quiet, spending more time in her room than usual. It was during one of those long, sleepless nights that I noticed something strange. I'd gotten up around midnight for a glass of water when I heard Sarah's voice coming from the kitchen. She was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones, but her laughter carried through the house, a sound I hadn't heard directed at me in months. As I crept closer, I caught fragments of the conversation that made my blood run cold. "The attorney says it'll be easy," she whispered into the phone. "Absent workaholic father, primary caregiver advantage. Take everything he worked for." I retreated to the guest bedroom, my hands shaking with rage and despair. But as I lay there in the dark, I became aware of a soft sound in the hallway, footsteps that were too light to be Sarah's. The next evening, as I sat in my makeshift bedroom reviewing legal documents that detailed my impending loss, I found Liam standing in the doorway. My 14-year-old daughter looked at me with an expression far too mature for her years, her eyes reflecting an understanding that chilled me. "Dad," she whispered, glancing back toward the hallway to ensure we weren't overheard, "I won't let her take us away from you." What I didn't understand then was that Liam had been watching, learning, and planning long before I even knew there was a war to fight. My brilliant daughter, who inherited my methodical mind and analytical nature, had noticed the changes in her mother months before the separation was announced. Unlike me, blinded by trust and work obligations, Liam saw everything with the clear eyes of an intelligent teenager who understood more about adult behavior than any child should have to. The secretive phone calls that ended abruptly when anyone entered the room. The new clothes that appeared in Sarah's closet. Expensive pieces that didn't match our family budget discussions. The way Sarah would leave for errands and return hours later smelling different, carrying the lingering scent of expensive cologne that definitely wasn't my drugstore brand. When Sarah finally announced the divorce that evening, Liam told me later, she wasn't shocked. She was terrified. Because unlike Jacob, who was too young to understand the implications, Liam immediately grasped what it meant. Their father would lose them. In the weeks following Sarah's announcement, while I was struggling to find evidence and legal advantages, Liam was conducting her own investigation with the methodical precision of someone who had everything to lose. She listened at doors, positioning herself strategically during her mother's phone calls. She read text messages when Sarah left her phone unattended, something that happened more frequently as Sarah grew careless in her confidence. The picture that emerged from Liam's surveillance was even worse than I'd imagined. She overheard Sarah's strategy sessions with her attorney, discussions about how to paint me as the absent workaholic who prioritized career over family. She listened to Sarah actually laugh, about how easy it would be to take everything he worked for and start fresh with Anthony. But it was Anthony himself who sealed Liam's resolve. When he started visiting my house, Liam observed him with the careful attention of a wildlife biologist studying a dangerous predator. Anthony Thorne was everything that disgusted her. Arrogant, unemployed, clearly planning to live comfortably off Sarah's anticipated divorce settlement. Worse than his character was his attitude toward the children he'd soon be helping to raise. Anthony made no effort to connect with Jacob, treating him like an annoying obstacle to his alone time with Sarah. But his interaction with Liam was even more troubling. During one afternoon visit, when Sarah had stepped out to take a call, Anthony cornered Liam in the kitchen. "You know, this transition will be easier for everyone if certain people don't get in the way," he said casually, but his eyes were cold. "Your mother and I are building something here. Smart kids understand how to adapt to new situations." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Liam understood that Anthony saw her intelligence as a potential problem, her observant nature as something that needed to be managed or suppressed. That night, Liam began researching custody law on her school laptop. She studied family court procedures, burden of proof requirements, and the factors that could shift custody decisions. She learned about the legal standards courts used, the precedents that guided judges' decisions, and most importantly, she discovered what could immediately disqualify a parent from custody. Evidence of child abuse or endangerment could trump every other factor in a custody case. The legal battle dragged on for 6 months, each court date bringing me closer to losing everything that mattered. Sarah's attorney was skilled and ruthless, successfully painting me as the workaholic who had prioritized career advancement over family connection. My own attorney, despite his best efforts, couldn't overcome the fundamental disadvantage. Sarah had been the hands-on parent, the one who knew the children's teachers, friends, and daily routines. I watched helplessly as the custody decision tipped increasingly in Sarah's favor. The judge seemed genuinely sympathetic to my situation, but bound by legal precedent and the evidence presented. I was facing joint custody at best, significant asset loss, and ongoing support payments that would fund Anthony's lifestyle while my children lived in a home where their father was unwelcome. The final hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in May. David Baker had prepared me for the worst-case scenario, explaining that barring some dramatic revelation, the court would likely award primary custody to Sarah with standard visitation rights for me. 2 weeks before that final hearing, Liam approached her best friend Maya with an unusual request. Maya was known throughout their school for her incredible skill with theater makeup and special effects, talents she'd developed. Through years of involvement in drama productions and a natural artistic ability that had won her multiple awards. "I need you to make bruises," Liam told her friend during lunch one day, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was proposing. "Bruises that will save my father's life." Maya, loyal and trusting, didn't ask too many questions. She understood that her friend was desperate, that something terrible was happening to Liam's family. "What kind of bruises?" Maya asked quietly, leaning closer across the cafeteria table. "The kind that look like someone grabbed me too hard," Liam replied calmly. "And maybe a burn mark, something that proves we're not safe." Over the course of the following week, Maya helped Liam create convincing evidence of abuse, layering theatrical pigments to create authentic-looking contusions that followed the pattern of adult fingerprints. Using techniques she'd learned from professional makeup artists and online tutorials. "Are you sure about this?" Maya whispered as she applied the final touches. "This could get people in serious trouble." "People who deserve serious trouble," Liam answered with determination. "My dad is going to lose us, and it's not fair." The final touch was the most painful. A linear burn mark that Liam inflicted on herself by pressing the flat edge of a clothing iron against her shoulder blade, holding it just long enough to create a lasting mark that would convince medical examiners. As the final hearing approached, Liam prepared for the performance of her young life, one that would either save her family or destroy it completely. The family court building felt like a tomb that Thursday morning. I sat beside David Baker in courtroom 4B, my hands trembling slightly as I watched Sarah take her place across the aisle with her attorney and Anthony by her side. Having Anthony present was a tactical error that would soon prove costly, but at that moment, his smug confidence only added to my despair. Judge Emma Smith presided, a seasoned family court judge with 20 years of experience. She'd heard it all before: bitter divorces, custody battles, adults using children as weapons against each other. Her expression suggested this was just another day in her courtroom. The proceedings began with standard testimony and financial disclosures. Sarah's attorney, Mitchell Reynolds, painted a compelling picture of devoted motherhood sacrificed for family stability. He presented Sarah as the parent who'd given up career ambitions to provide hands-on care, who knew every detail of the children's lives while I remained buried in work obligations. "Mrs. Vance has been the primary caregiver for both children since their births," Reynolds argued, his voice filled with righteous conviction. "She's attended every parent-teacher conference, every medical appointment, every school event. While Mr. Vance was building his career, Mrs. Vance was building relationships with their children. When David cross-examined Sarah, she performed beautifully, the picture of a wronged wife who'd finally found the courage to leave an absent husband. She admitted to the affair but framed it as the inevitable result of years of emotional neglect. Anthony, she claimed, had simply provided the emotional support I'd failed to give. "I deserve to be happy," Sarah testified, her eyes filling with practiced tears. "I deserve a partner who values our family enough to be present for it." Judge Smith nodded sympathetically, making notes that I was certain spelled my doom. The proceedings moved to financial assessments and character witnesses. Everything was unfolding exactly as David had predicted. Sarah's legal advantage was overwhelming. I could feel my children slipping away with each passing moment. Then Judge Smith called for the children's testimony. Jacob was questioned first. My 10-year-old son, looking small and nervous in his best button-down shirt, answered the judge's questions clearly. "Jacob, where would you prefer to live?" Judge Smith asked gently. "With my dad," he replied without hesitation, his voice small but certain. "Do you understand that your parents won't be living together anymore?" she continued. "Yes, ma'am," he answered quietly. "I just don't understand why we can't all live together like before." His preference was noted, but, as the judge explained, his age meant his wishes were just one factor among many. Liam was called next. My 14-year-old daughter walked to the witness area with a composure that struck me as unusual, even for her naturally serious demeanor. She answered the standard questions calmly. "Liam, both you and your brother have expressed a preference to live with your father. Can you tell me why?" Judge Smith inquired. "Both Jacob and I prefer to live with our father," she replied steadily. "Neither of us have any concerns about his ability to care for us." "And what about your mother? Do you have any concerns about living with her?" the judge asked. "No concerns about her ability," Liam answered carefully. Judge Smith began moving toward what seemed like the inevitable joint custody ruling, citing the children's ages and the importance of maintaining relationships with both parents despite the marriage's dissolution. Then Liam raised her hand. "Your Honor, I have something to show you," she said, her voice cutting through the formal atmosphere. The courtroom fell into complete silence. Even the court reporter looked up from her machine. Judge Smith's eyebrows raised slightly. Children interrupting proceedings was highly unusual. "What is it, dear?" the judge asked with curiosity. With movements that seemed both deliberate and trembling, Liam walked toward the bench. She rolled up the sleeves of her cardigan methodically, revealing angry red and purple bruise marks on both forearms, contusions that were clearly in the shape of adult fingers, as if someone had gripped her arms violently. A collective gasp echoed through the courtroom, Sarah's face drained of all color. But Liam wasn't finished. She turned slightly, lowering her shirt collar to reveal a linear burn mark on her shoulder blade, a mark that looked exactly like what it was supposed to represent: deliberate abuse with a heated object. "My mother and Anthony hurt us," Liam stated, her voice trembling but filled with conviction. "They told us that if we ever told anyone, Dad would go to jail and we'd be sent away to foster care. They said nobody would believe us because Mom was the good parent and Dad was never home to protect us." The explosion that followed was immediate and visceral. Sarah shot to her feet, her composure finally cracking completely. "That's not true," she screamed desperately. "She's lying, I would never." My reaction was purely instinctual. The moment I processed what my daughter had revealed, rage consumed me completely. I roared with the primal fury of a father who believes his children have been abused, lunging across the table toward Anthony with murder in my eyes. "You son of a bitch," I shouted as court officers moved to restrain me. "I'll kill you, I'll kill you." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Anthony tried to shrink into his chair, his earlier arrogance evaporating as he faced the very real possibility of a lynch mob. Sarah continued screaming denials while her attorney frantically tried to maintain control of the situation. "She's making it up," Sarah cried out frantically. "This is some kind of manipulation. Ethan put her up to this." "I would never hurt my children," Anthony protested loudly, his voice cracking with panic. Judge Smith's gavel crashed repeatedly as she called for order, her voice cutting through the chaos with practiced authority. "Order, order in my courtroom," she commanded sternly. She turned to face the court officers. "Remove Mr. Vance to the hallway until he can control himself. Mrs. Vance, sit down immediately or you'll be held in contempt." As I was escorted out, still struggling against the officer's grip, I caught one last glimpse of Liam. My daughter stood perfectly still at the bench, tears streaming down her face. Whether from fear, relief, or the weight of what she'd just done, I couldn't tell. Judge Smith immediately called for an adjournment. She ordered both children placed temporarily with Child Protective Services, pending a complete medical and forensic examination of the abuse allegations. Emergency protective orders were issued barring Sarah and Anthony from any contact with the children. Within 2 hours, formal charges had been filed: felony child endangerment, child abuse, and conspiracy to commit child abuse. Sarah and Anthony were both detained, processed, and released on bail with strict conditions. Sarah's carefully constructed image as the devoted mother lay in ruins, replaced by the specter of a woman who had endangered her own children for the sake of her lover. The custody battle that had seemed hopeless just hours before was now completely reversed. As I left the courthouse that afternoon, David Baker pulled me aside. "I don't know how those injuries happened," he said quietly, his eyes meeting mine with an expression I couldn't quite read. "And I don't want to know, but your daughter just saved everything you worked for. Don't ask questions you don't want answered." 2 months have passed since that day in court, and the transformation of our lives has been nothing short of miraculous, or perhaps tragic, depending on your perspective on what Liam sacrificed to achieve it. The medical examination confirmed what the court needed to hear. The injuries were consistent with deliberate abuse. The bruising patterns matched adult hand sizes, and the burn mark appeared to be from a heated metal object applied with intentional pressure. The forensic team couldn't definitively prove who had inflicted the injuries, but the timing, the children's testimony, and Sarah's complete lack of credible defense created an overwhelming case against her. Judge Smith's final ruling was swift and decisive. Full custody to me, a 70-30 asset split in my favor due to Sarah's criminal behavior and destruction of the family unit, and mandatory supervised visitation for Sarah pending the outcome of her criminal trial. Sarah's parental rights were suspended indefinitely. Faced with the possibility of a lengthy prison sentence and complete financial ruin, Sarah accepted a plea deal: 3 years in minimum security prison for child endangerment, permanent loss of custody rights, and no claim to any marital assets beyond the 30% already allocated by the court. Anthony, facing separate charges and unable to afford proper legal defense, received a 5-year sentence. We moved into a new home in the neighboring Riverside district, smaller than our previous house, but it's ours, untainted by memories of betrayal and deception. I negotiated a reduced work schedule with Power Grid Solutions, accepting a pay cut in exchange for flexible hours that let me be present for the children. I hired Mrs. Patterson, a retired teacher, to provide after-school care when my schedule requires it. The three of us entered intensive family counseling with Dr. Alina Rodriguez, working through the trauma of the court battle, Sarah's betrayal, and the complex emotions surrounding our new life. Jacob, resilient as children often are, has adapted well. He misses his mother but seems to understand that she made choices that hurt our family. His trust in me has only grown stronger. Liam, however, carries the weight of her actions in ways that both inspire and terrify me. She's thrived academically, earning straight A's and taking on leadership roles in school activities. But sometimes, I catch her staring into space with an expression far too mature for a 15-year-old, and I wonder what the cost of her sacrifice truly was. Tonight, as we sit together on our new couch watching a movie, a routine we're still building in this house that's slowly becoming home, I finally ask the question that's been haunting me for months. Liam, I say quietly, pausing the movie and pulling her close, I need to ask you something and I need the truth. Those bruises, how did they really happen? She looks up at me, and for a moment I see not my 15-year-old daughter but someone much older, someone who made an impossible choice to protect the people she loved. After a long pause, she tells me everything. I watched Mom for months before she told us about the divorce, she begins carefully. I saw the phone calls, the new clothes, the way she acted different. I knew something was wrong. Why didn't you tell me? I asked gently. Because I thought you already knew and were just pretending everything was okay, she replies with mature honesty. When she finally announced the divorce, I wasn't shocked. I was scared, because I understood what it meant. We were going to lose you. She describes the months of surveillance, documenting Sarah's affair and legal strategy, the research into custody law and the factors that could shift a court's decision, the realization that traditional evidence wouldn't be enough, that we needed something irrefutable to overcome Sarah's legal advantages. I researched everything, she explains with scientific detachment. Family court precedents, custody factors, what evidence actually matters. I realized that unless we had proof of danger to us kids, the court would give Mom custody because she was home more. So you decided to create that proof? I ask, though I already know the answer. I decided to save our family, she replies firmly. Maya helped me understand how real bruises develop, the color progression, the way skin reacts to different types of pressure. We practiced for hours to get the fingerprint pattern right. The methodical precision of her plan is both brilliant and horrifying, but it's her description of the burn that breaks my heart. That was the hardest part, she admits quietly. I stood in the bathroom at 2 in the morning, holding the iron, knowing that the pain I was about to feel might save us. It had to look real enough to convince doctors. Jesus, Liam, I whisper, holding her tighter. I love you, Dad, she continues, her voice steady despite the weight of her confession. You worked so hard for us. You gave us everything. A home, security, all those Saturday mornings at the bookstore, coaching Jacob's team, being there when it really mattered. I couldn't let her take it all away just because the law was broken. Sometimes the only way to get justice is to create your own evidence. I'm torn between horror at what she endured, the planning, the self-harm, the perjury in court, and overwhelming gratitude that she saved our family. What she did was illegal, potentially devastating if the truth ever emerged. But I also know that Sarah's betrayal was real, that Anthony posed a genuine threat to my children's well-being, and that the courts would have failed us without intervention. What you did was incredibly brave and incredibly dangerous, I tell her honestly. I'm proud of how much you love our family, but I never want you to hurt yourself for anyone ever again. I won't have to, she replies with quiet confidence. You're here now, you're protecting us. I will never tell anyone what you just told me, I promise her, my voice thick with emotion. And you will never have to do anything like that again because I will always protect you both now. Always. As I reflect on these past months, I'm forced to confront uncomfortable truths about justice, morality, and the lengths we'll go to protect the people we love. What Liam did was technically fraud, but Sarah's betrayal was emotionally devastating, and Anthony's presence in my children's lives would have been genuinely harmful. Justice isn't always clean. Sometimes it's a brilliant, necessary lie told by a desperate teenager who loved her father more than she feared the consequences. Sometimes the system fails, and ordinary people have to create their own solutions. We're healing now, We're rebuilding. Jacob's laughter fills our new house, and I never miss his baseball games. Liam and I still have our Saturday bookstore mornings, though now they carry the weight of shared secrets and unspoken understanding. She's applying to colleges, brilliant and driven, carrying scars that no one else can see. Sarah serves her sentence in minimum security, reportedly a model prisoner who maintains her innocence. Anthony was released after 18 months for good behavior and has disappeared from our city entirely. They've paid their price for the destruction they caused, or at least, the destruction they were found guilty of causing. We are moving forward, carrying a secret that binds us together forever. Not just the truth about the bruises, but the deeper truth that sometimes love requires terrible choices, and sometimes protecting your family means dancing with darkness. The wicked have paid their price, and Ethan, Liam, and Jacob are moving forward, a family forged not just by blood, but by loyalty, sacrifice, and the kind of love that refuses to accept defeat. Some might call what we did wrong, others might call it justice, I call it survival. And I regret nothing.